Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, September 21st, 2020, and today I'm going to be talking about Donald Trump and white voters, the biggest demographic group in this country that gave Donald Trump the victory back in 2016. They voted for him by a very solid margin, which Joe Biden is now making inroads in. If you're wondering why you see a number of headlines talking about how Joe Biden is underperforming Hillary Clinton in terms of minority vote, but don't understand why Donald Trump is running worse than where he was 4 years ago, it's because of the fact that Joe Biden has won over a pretty significant portion of the white electorate that the Democratic Party really hasn't tapped into besides Obama, maybe in 2008. But now what we're seeing is the Democratic Party doing very well amongst white voters. Donald Trump relied on these voters to land him in the White House, most notably in 3 specific states: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. These are 3 states where the white voting population is above 80%, larger than the national average, and in states where we're seeing 6 to 10% black vote across the states that put the Democratic Party in a very tricky situation, because yes, they need to focus on minority turnout nationwide, but that's not the center focus of the Rust Belt. The center focus is winning over those white working class voters that landed Trump a victory, that have always voted for Democrats in the past before Donald Trump ran in 2016. So those 3 states, those are 46 red electoral votes that the Democratic Party would love to have back. What we see is that Joe Biden is winning over these voters by very significant margins. The article gets into a little bit more detail, so we can talk about that as we scroll through it. So like I said, they start off the article saying Donald Trump is making modest inroads with Latinos, polls suggesting he's pulling slightly more black support than 2016. But Trump is tilting at the margins with those groups. His bigger problem is the demographic that sent him to the White House: white voters, whose embrace of Trump appears to be slipping in critical, predominantly white swing states. Minnesota. This is a state Hillary Clinton won by 1.5%. Biden now leads them by a pretty significant amount. I believe the last A-rated poll had him up 16% in the state. Trump, was running 2% behind Biden with white voters in Minnesota. He carried them by 7 in 2016, which means Minnesota, which is a very large white minority state, or white majority state, Minnesota very well could have gone from being lean for the Democrats in 2016 now to likely for the Democrats. We're seeing Joe Biden do much better in terms of white voters than what Hillary Clinton carried in 2016, and they are the biggest voting bloc, which means they will have a very large impact on the electorate, obviously. The same story in Wisconsin. Trump won non-college educated white women by 16% in Wisconsin. He's now losing them by 9. That's a 25-point swing. 25-point swing since 2016. He's now even in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump won them back in 2016. And looking at these 3 states, like I said, over 80% of the vote was from white voters. Looking at Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, yes, increasing minority turnout will be helpful to the Democratic Party's campaign. But what we see now is Biden is tying in Pennsylvania on, minorities easily break for the Democratic Party 60-40, 70-30. Pennsylvania goes likely for the Democrats. Michigan, this is a state that the Democratic Party has a pretty strong grip on. Let's take a look at that forecast, one of the more Democratic states here. Biden is expected to get 53.5% of the vote to Trump's 45%. Biden is expected to do very well in this state. We're talking an 8-point margin of victory. Michigan goes to the Democrats. Wisconsin, another state expected to go to the Democratic Party. Biden expected to outrun Trump by 6% in this state, likely for the Democrats. So why? Well, like we've seen in this article, Trump has lost his grip on white voters, and that was a very crucial voting bloc, not only in the Rust Belt, but across the country. Let's take a look at Texas. This is a state that Donald Trump is expected to carry. It's 38 electoral votes, but the margin is super close. Biden has a 1 in 3 chance at winning Texas. 1 in 3 for a Democrat. Looking at the expected vote share, it gets even better for Biden. He runs up as the largest Democratic Party candidate in terms of voting share in years. I mean, in elections, we're talking decades. The Democratic Party has not come this close. I think the last time it went to a Democrat was 76, and the last time a Democrat got this close was maybe in terms of margin, Clinton, but nowhere near in terms of percentage of the vote. So looking at Biden at 48% of the forecasted vote share, very good for Democrats, because that's within striking distance. It went from being 16 for Romney to 9 for Trump to 3 for Trump in 2020. assuming that this forecast is correct. But that has largely to do with the fact that white voters are moving away from Donald Trump. We see it also happening in Arizona easily. We see it happening in North Carolina. We see it happening in the Northeast. We see it happening in Maine, a state that went to Clinton by 3%. Biden is expected to carry it by 14%. In New Hampshire, another Clinton state from 2016, let's take a look at the expected vote share, running it up by 6%. Goes to Biden. So when we're looking at all of these battleground states, or at least previously competitive states, Biden has done a lot better because of his ability to win over white voters. It's right. I mean, Biden is running under Hillary Clinton in some of these battleground states, such as Florida, or, Latino support nationwide compared to Hillary Clinton. First of all, it's marginal. It's not too big that it's going to drastically change the election, but Biden is making up for it and more, nationally and state by state, with white voters. What we see where Biden may be lacking in Florida, he's still up. Why? Because of white suburban voters that previously were Romney, McCain, even Trump voters in 2016 that have now moved over into the Biden column for this election. It's not just here. Like I said, a lot of people are considering this to be a very important issue. And also, following Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing away, it is possible the Democratic Party makes even more inroads in a number of these demographic groups, especially white voters, where it's super, super crucial. So, looking at this entire article, they're pretty much talking about polling numbers. We can see Trump's rhetoric does not seem to be resonating with white America to the degree that it did in 2016. That year, whites cast nearly 3/4 of the vote nationally, and Trump won those voters by around 15%. So the election was actually pretty close, but that's given the fact that 75% of the voting demographic was white voters, which Trump won by 15%. If he's even coming close to being even, it is very possible that Biden decimates Donald Trump on the electoral map. Why? If Biden is running even in a demographic group that gave Trump a narrow victory in 2016, even though they voted for him by 15%, no minority groups are in favor of Donald Trump at this point. Not a single one. Which means if Biden runs even, he just expands based off the minority vote. We're seeing a 90-10 split for black voters. 60-40 amongst Hispanic voters, 60-40 amongst Asian voters. All of that benefits Biden. All of it. And it's likely to land him a very solid victory in the White House. And Trump is losing this very key demographic. Suburban whites are pretty much gone for Trump. I made a video talking about suburban voters. You can see it in the top right of the screen. The GOP fears that the suburban vote is lost. Well, it pretty much is. The Democratic Party has, made inroads in states that they never thought were going to be remotely competitive. Let's take a look at the Atlanta suburbs in Georgia. I mean, the Democratic Party is doing very well there. They did very well in 2018, and now it looks like Georgia may be in to be one of the closer races this election. Look at Georgia. Trump is expected to carry it by a little bit over 2%. The closest Republican state is Ohio. Trump's expected to carry it by 1%. It went by 8% in 2016 for Donald Trump. 8% down to 1%. Georgia goes from 6 down to 2. Iowa goes from 9 down to what? 3. So when we're looking at all of these states, Joe Biden is doing much better amongst white voters, which is what's landing him a very strong victory in some of these states, expected victory, and very competitive nature in some of these other ones, because it doesn't just end here. We see now that, South Carolina is expected to be less than 10%. Alaska is expected to be less than 10%. Missouri is expected to be exactly 10%, despite voting for Trump by 19% in 2016. So when we look at Missouri and we look at Alaska, we look at South Carolina and Texas, would you ever even envision these states being competitive? Maybe Missouri, because it used to be a bellwether, not so much now. But in the 2020 election, if we had looked at the 2016 results immediately after Election Day, and you said South Carolina, Alaska, Texas, Iowa, Georgia, Ohio, were all going to be under 10%, under 5% for Texas, Iowa, Georgia, and Ohio? Absolutely not. Would you have thought that Biden would be able to have solid grips on Virginia and Colorado? I mean, we're talking about Biden winning Virginia larger than he's winning in Missouri, larger than Trump's winning in Missouri, larger than Trump's winning in Alaska and South Carolina. Looking at Wisconsin, this is a state where Biden is expected to carry it by above 5%, which means Texas is closer than Wisconsin, Iowa's closer than Wisconsin, Georgia's closer than Wisconsin, and Ohio's closer than Wisconsin as well. The reason for that? White voters. It is very, very important for a lot of pundits to realize that Trump won off this voting group back in 2016, that he's either losing now in some key battleground states, or overall, he's just diminished his lead to a point where it's very small, where minority voters will take the rest and move it in favor of Joe Biden. Because I think Virginia is an excellent example of the white flight from the Trump campaign. It was close in 2016. It had always been close on state and, local elections for the GOP. But now the Virginia GOP is close to being irrelevant. They didn't field a good candidate in 2018. They lost horrendously in the 2017 governor elections. 2016, they lost in a year where Trump was able to carry a number of other swing states. I guess you could say it was Tim Kaine, but could you really? 2012, 2008, both voted for Obama. Now 2020, Biden is expected to carry it by larger than 10%. That's because these white voters, which previously voted for Bush and were okay with McCain, still may not have voted for him by too solid of a margin, where Biden is now winning them over. Where Clinton narrowly won them over, where Biden is doing significantly better, nationwide and in Virginia. So what we see is that Joe Biden is doing very well amongst white voters, and it's enough to land in victories not only in the states that Clinton won in 2016, Colorado, New Mexico, Virginia, New Hampshire, Minnesota, but also move over a number of Trump states from 2016, making them either very competitive or in the Biden column. Look at the Rust Belt. Look at the Sun Belt. Look at the South. Joe Biden is doing very well. States that were previously safe are now competitive. Take Texas, for example. 16 points for the Republicans 8 years ago, down to 3-4%. Iowa went to Trump 4 years ago by 9%, down to 2%. Ohio went to Trump by 8% in 2016, down to 1%. South Carolina went to Trump by 14%, down to single digits. Alaska went to Trump by 14%, down to single digits. So as we look across this entire map, we see why Biden is doing so well, despite a number of ads saying, or not a number of ads, a number of articles saying Biden is losing some support amongst minority voters. But he's making up for it, and then some, drastically, nationwide. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2020 election videos if you just want to see some other analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.